the show where we do not walk on eggshells, we don't beat about the bush, and we certainly do not, fear to say the truth and talk about matters that affect us, our life, and our environment. My name is Grace Ndunge, and I will be hosting this very exciting show this morning where we're going to be talking about mediating workplace conflicts. Yes, right now we are thinking, what workplace? There is workplace because we are still working. We are still working even outside. And now the conflict is different. It's probably not what it would normally be when we are meeting physically, but it's still there, and we need to mediate it, and we need to sort it out. In studio, I'm joined by our resident psychologist and mediator, Dr. Beatrice Nzou. Dr. Beatrice, thank you very much for joining us. Karibu sana to the show. Dr. Beatrice, I'd like you to first, of course, introduce yourself to our audience and briefly tell us about your work in counseling and mediation.
Thank you so much, Grace. Good morning, everybody. I am Beatrice Nzou, as Grace has said. I'm a mediator who is accredited. Actually, I'm a certified mediator. I'm a member of Institute of Certified Mediators and Reconcilers. And I'm also a member of International Mediators Institute. I'm based in Machakos. My office is right at the center of Machakos town, where I have an office where I do mediation as well as psychological counseling. As Grace has said, I happen to be a certified mediator and also a professional psychological counselor. And Triwane is a Kikamba word, which means let us agree. And that's why as the Triwane, we are there to help people agree among themselves when they have issues. We also help people to agree in the family issues, in the workplace, and in the environment. My number is 0724 17 92 88, and you can get me on my email, beatricenzou@yahoo.com.
Thank you very much, Daktari. We are talking about mediation in the workplace, and mediation is a topic we started to talk about last week. Last week we talked about family mediation. We said family mediation is about, conflict that just arises within our families, and we looked at how you can manage this thing, the conflict that arises in your family, without necessarily having to run off to court. Now today we are changing gears, and we are going to talk about mediation, but this time we want to talk about workplace mediation. Please keep in mind that this conversation is also happening on Twitter. We're using the Twitter handle Triwane, Grace Nzou, and Beatrice Nzou, and Newsline. The hashtag is Work Logic Straight Talk. The hashtag again, I say, is Work Logic. Another hashtag is Straight Talk. So Dr. Beatrice, I want us to dive into this conversation, and let's just begin by talking about what is workplace mediation. What is that mediation all about?
Thank you, Grace. What we need to understand is what brings into being workplace mediation. For workplace mediation to take place, there has to be a conflict in the workplace. And a conflict in the workplace is a condition between people whose tasks or the duties that they are required to perform, they interdepend from one person to the other. And these people happen to have, to feel not good about each other. They don't look at each other as if they are there for each other. Everybody feels angry with the other one, and they tend to feel to find fault from one person to the other, and then they start using behaviors that can cause business problems. And that is the time that a workplace mediation will come in. Basically, what workplace mediation will do is to help the parties identify their issues and help them to see how they can resolve, how they can reconcile their differences, their feelings about each other, for them to be able to perform well.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Workplace, you're saying workplace conflict is basically when, you know, the kind of tension that arises when two people that whose work interdepends on each other, when they begin not to, you know, understand each other. And a lot of times this conflict that comes up, you're saying, is not necessarily words or physical in nature. It's just behavioral, that people change their behavior, they stop doing one thing and they start doing the other, or they do excessively too much of one thing or refuse to do completely something. And that is basically what brings in conflict. Dr. Beatrice, what are some of the sources of conflict? What brings this kind of conflict in the workplace?
Sometimes could be the low salary that some employees are getting. And so since at home they cannot make their ends meet, they come on duty, and it's like they look at the supervisor like he's the one who doesn't want him to, who says pay this one a little money. Other things is also when the employer doesn't really appreciate the work of the employee, and you realize that the employee feels unappreciated no matter how hard they try their best. The other thing is when there is no communication between the administration and the workforce, that when the decisions are being made by the management and they do not involve the workers, sometimes the workers might feel, why are we just being pushed into do these things? And they look at it like being intimidated or being punished. And so there is need for communication. And also, sometimes when we get employees whose qualifications are lower than their juniors, and then they are supposed to be the supervisors, it is possible we will have some conflict among the staff. And the other thing, which is also very common, is where employees, the management or the owner of the business, employees relatives like their supervisors, and these employees kind of being supervisors, they feel like, after all, this business belongs to my relatives. This business belongs to my uncle. So no matter what, you have to follow what I have to say, whether it's wrong or not. I am the boss here. And this can really bring in a big conflict between the employees, because those who know and those who have been there for long, who are well qualified, will really feel misused.
Okay, Dr. Beatrice, thank you very much. I mean, those are various sources of conflict that you talk about. You're talking about, you know, low motivation for employees because of, you know, maybe their salaries are a bit low. You're talking about conflict arising from home. You're also talking about employees not being fully involved in decision making within the organization. You're talking about lack of communication between employees and a variety of other reasons. So how do I see as, say, let's start first of all from between, you know, on a lateral level, how do I see, or how do I identify a red flag between me and a colleague of mine, not between me and the management? Let's begin first between me and a colleague of mine. How do I identify conflict? What is the sign that there's conflict that's about to rise or that has arisen?
On how you relate with this colleague, one indication that there is a conflict between you and your colleague is a situation where you find the other colleague is avoiding you. The colleague is not willing even to engage you, and you used to talk a lot. All of a sudden, the colleague is withdrawn, and even when that person who is your colleague and your work is dependent on hers or his, decides just to withdraw information from you. And that means then you are not even able to perform your duty, because if that person is supposed to give you the information that you are supposed to work with, then you realize you cannot perform. The other thing is maybe you send a message to this colleague, he doesn't or she doesn't respond. And sometimes the colleague can just be silent, just decide to shut up on you and give you nil by mouth.
All right, Dr. Beatrice, those are very interesting signs of conflict. One, withdrawal. The person that you used to talk to does not want to talk to you anymore. Another sign is that they start withholding information from you. They don't respond to your messages. Basically, change of behavior. And of course, sometimes, Dr. Beatrice, we know that people change behaviors because of other factors. So even as you're looking at this sort of behavior, you need, of course, to keep in mind that human beings are not constant. They're not robots. So they could be sick, for example, or they could be having, a headache. So how do I tell that this is behavior that's a sign and it's not my colleague who's having a bad day, or it's not, the fact that this guy has a stomachache today?
You see, Grace, if somebody is a colleague and one has a problem, like she has a stomachache, and she comes on duty and she just keeps quiet, that's not normal. If it is normal, she should be able to say, you see, I'm not feeling well, so today I might not really talk much, or I might not be able to walk up and down. But when the person just keeps quiet, and then when you ask, are you sick? She says, oh no, I'm okay, and then keep quiet, then this is an indication that there is something that is cooking up.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's now move to the signs of conflict between the employee and the employer. How do I know as an employer, and especially at the management level, how do I know that there's some conflict that is brewing between my employees and me?
Yes, one of the way, like I said, Grace, would be the issue of the employees are just avoiding you. They are not willing to pass any information about what's happening in the workplace. And sometimes you might even assign some duties and somebody just doesn't respond to what you wanted that person to do. And sometimes, even as an employer, you might find that your employees might even sometimes start threatening you by way of, if you don't give me this, I might have to leave this employment.
Okay, yeah, that happens sometimes. I think that's a really good sign of an indicator that your conflict is brewing within your organization. Now, we already know what workplace conflict is. We've already said that workplace conflict is basically conflict that arises because of people that have jobs that are interdependent on each other. And we've looked at the various sources of conflict, and we've said there are various sources of conflicts. Basically, most of them around lack of proper communication, lack of involvement, lack of or misinformation. And of course, it's all around in communication. We've looked at the various indicators of workplace conflict, and we're saying withdrawal of information, withdrawal of services, change in behavior. That is the biggest sign, or the most telling sign that something is actually very, very wrong or conflict is actually brewing in your organization. Now, when we talk about conflict, usually in mediation, it comes at different levels or different stages. Dr. Beatrice, I'd kindly want to request that you take us through the various levels of conflict in an organization, because we know that conflict doesn't happen. You just don't wake up in the morning, for example, and all your staff members are presenting a resignation letter. Something must have been happening over time. So let's talk about the various levels of conflict.
So the first level is the one we call blips. This is a situation where people, there is a bit of mild anger that can be tolerated by the employer and by the employee. A situation where even when somebody gets annoyed, they are able to say, it's okay, we can do with it. And at that level, there is a lot of trust. The employees like each other. The employer likes the employee. The employees like the employer. And both of them have got some trust in each other. But a situation comes and things are not the way they feel they should be, but they are able to handle it and say, it's okay, let's keep going because we have a bigger opportunity ahead of us, rather than keeping on getting annoyed with each other. And this is really a normal situation in many of the organizations. And this kind of level of conflict doesn't really in many times reach the management. Usually this can be handled by the departmental supervisors. It can be handled in the departmental level, and the management might never get to know about this. And the next level would be where we talk of a clash. Now, at this time, this is where you start seeing the red flags, where distances starts being noted. The employee is avoiding to meet with the employer if it is a small organization. If it is a big organization, the employee is keeping a distance and avoiding the supervisor or the manager who are there. And at this time, there is the stress and there is a bit of attention that can be realized and noted. And when people are interacting with each other, is it possible to keep on hearing like raising of their voices when they are being asked to explain, when they are called to say why things are like this? It is a time that sometimes the employee would just break down because they feel they are not wanted, and even sometimes threaten about that. This level of conflict is easy, manageable, and handled by the employer. Of course, depending on the administration structure that is there. Following the administration structure, this level of conflict can be solved within the organization. Now, the need to handle the clash is because if it is not handled, then the next level is the crisis. And where crisis arises, we realize possibility of termination of relationships. We realize violation of the law, violation of ethical requirements by the employees for the organization. And sometimes even the employer can also violate the law, like paying low salary. They can also violate the law by not doing the ethical requirement for the employees. I want to say at this level, there is risk of physical violence and sometimes really reactions that are not very good. It is at this time when the organization doesn't bring in an intervention which would be done by way of a mediator, a professional mediator, then it is at this time when we can get strikes in the organization. It is at this time that we can get the employees putting down their tools because they really want their demands to be heard. And since the employer or the organization has not listened, then they down tool their tools, and it is really a crisis.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Beatrice. There are 3 levels of conflict is what we are learning today. The first level is what we call bliss. And Dr. Beatrice is telling us the bliss level is where you are actually, it's just, sometimes it doesn't even get to the boss. The employees sort it out between themselves. And then we move to the next level, which is called the clash. And at the clash level, you really need management to get involved. So now it has moved between employee and moved to the management. So it's becoming a bigger thing. And if I'm learning, if I'm hearing you right, Dr. Beatrice, you're saying that the clash is the best level for us to sort out anything that has come out, because the issue is still in the hands of the management. It's not gotten out of hand. And then, of course, now we have a crisis. And a crisis is when things have just gotten out of hand. So we see strikes, we see employees downing their tools, going on a go slow, and basically stopping the organization's activities. Conflict is always amongst us. It does not go. And you cannot avoid it, because that's how life is, and that's how human beings are. They clash, they understand each other. But for that relationship to be mediated properly, you must make sure that you catch the conflict before it explodes. You need to quite literally nip it in the bud. That's very, very important. Now, I want us to move to to talk about the effects of conflict in the workplace. But before we do that, I would like to get a few questions. I have a few questions that are coming through. So I'd like to invite our virtual studio audience to kindly unmute themselves and ask a question. In the meantime, we also have other questions that have come through. So I will also be looking at that just now. So any of our virtual studio audience, anybody who wants to ask a question, kindly unmute yourself and ask your question. Good morning, Sammy. How are you? Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, just Doctor, can you draw the demarcation between counseling and mediation? How do we differentiate? What is the line between the two?
Counseling and mediation. Thank you, Sami. One good thing is that, as I said from the beginning, when it comes to counseling, you are trying to get people to identify their own issues and be able to sort them out. Again, it is also the same way in mediation, that the mediator is not the owner of the conflict. The mediator is only a facilitator to ensure the disputants are able to sort out their issue. While in counseling, the counselor is a facilitator again to ensure that the clients are able to identify their roles in the conflict or in their problem, and they are able to make a decision, informed decision, really knowing what they are supposed to do. I must admit, in many times, many people might not see the difference, but the difference is very thin because you use skills, listening skills, which are very vital in counseling. Listening skills are also very vital in mediation. And so one needs to be sure, needs to know this is a counseling issue and this is a mediation issue. Remember, a mediation issue, if not handled, they have an opportunity to go the legal way. But people who have an issue of not listening to each other, you cannot sue somebody because somebody is not listening to you. That is a counseling issue. But when you are in mediation in the workplace, you can lose your job because of not listening to the administration.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Beatrice. I think that's quite clear. Mediation is more around issues that would usually lead to, legal issues. Counseling is more about your heart and your soul, matters that you're trying to resolve within yourself. Now, we have other questions that are coming through from our Facebook audience. One of the questions is, what happens when your supervisor retaliates if you ask for mediation? So maybe something has been going on in the office and or in the workplace, and you asked for mediation, and the supervisor is not excited about that. How do you handle that?
One thing that is now becoming a requirement in our country is that every organization should have a department for mediation. And so if the organization has not set up the mediation department, that is where it would be difficult. But when the normal functioning of the organization allows for mediation, I don't think that would be a big deal, because if your supervisor is not ready to have you sit and negotiate, I know there is the next supervisor, there is the next boss, the next level of administration. So the best way is to seek audience with the next level of administration.
Okay, all right. So the other question here that comes in, and it's a very interesting question, is, should mediation be a secret between differing parties? Should mediation be a secret between differing parties?
A secret. This one is a good one. I must admit that it's good to know from the word go, as we said last week, that mediation is a private process. In other words, whatever is talked about in mediation should not be cannot be used out there in the in a legal. Neither is the mediator. Actually, it is ethical for the mediator. The ethical requirement of a mediator is to be somebody who can keep confidentiality. And so mediation is a private, confidential process. And so when the people have been able to sit and get their case mediated, it should remain within the people.
All right. Thank you very much. Mediation is a private affair, and especially so, what is more private is the conversation that goes in during the mediation. And of course, it's not necessary to put up in the newsletter that Mr. X and Miss X are going through mediation because of the issue they had in the workplace last week. So we are talking about workplace mediation, mediating conflict in the workplace. And we are on Twitter conversing about the same issue using the hashtag WorkLogic and using the hashtag Straight Talk. We're saying that conflict in the workplace arises amongst people who depend on each other. They do jobs that are interdependent. And we have looked at the various sources of conflict in the workplace, and it's a wide range of issues, ranging from low salaries, lack of motivation, and especially we've said poor communication between employees and between the management and to the and to the other people. Now, we also have, we talked about the indicators of conflict in a workplace, and the greatest, the most telling indicator is withdrawal. When there is withdrawal of, any kind of behavior, like, someone used to give you information promptly, it's not coming anymore. Someone used to greet you, they stopped to greet you for some reason. That's an indicator that there is actually some kind of conflict that's going on or is brewing between you. We have talked about the various levels of conflict, and we have said there are 3 levels of conflict. Bliss. This is when the conflict is between 2 people really, and they just sort it amongst themselves. It's not a big deal, they say sorry and that thing is over and done. And then that conflict, if it's not handled, may move to a clash, whereby you would now need intervention by the management. So if it was 2 employees, it would need the management. If it was a manager and maybe their junior, they would need a third party within the organization to help them sort it out. And then finally, we have a crisis, and this is a conflict that has been left to escalate, to get out of hand. And that's when we see strikes happening, we see go slows and such kinds of things. And I want to move this conversation now and look at, Dr. Beatrice, I want us to look at what are the effects of conflict in the workplace.
Thank you, Grace. One thing we want to realize that I want to say that a conflict in the workplace is a very expensive element in an organization. I want to look at it from 2 different levels. The first level is to the employer or the organization. I want to say that the cost implication of a conflict, if it is not handled in a good time, it can be very expensive. Like if we let it to reach the crisis level, where the employees are out on the streets and chanting all what they need to say, a few things will happen to the organization. Number one, that day there will be no work. So the income, the production of that day, and as long as that strike moves on, is wasted, and it is never found. Is not easy even to recover. And then the other thing that happens when a conflict is not handled is that in an organization, we realize there is, with the slow go down with the workers, then the lower the production or the motivation, the production is lowered, and this leads to lower performance by the employees, which in return then will mean low profit, because the sales will be low, and so the profits will also be low. And again, another thing that happens to the employer if conflicts are not handled, if a good employee, a key, good, well-skilled employees leaves your organization because of a conflict, it will be very expensive to recruit another good, in quotes, another good employee who is well experienced, and even to train that person to the level of the other employee that you have lost. That would be very expensive. When the conflict is allowed to go into crisis for the organization, sometimes the employees will go out and even vandalize the institution, the buildings. They damage quite a bit of some systems, and this will be very expensive to redo again. And then the brand, the name of the organization is also tinted. In other words, it's not seen to be moving well the way it is. It will be, that is the organization whose employees went on strike. Why? And sometimes people will even give reasons that are not true, just to taint the name and the reputation of the organization. Now, when we come to the employee, the employee might lose a job if conflicts are not handled in good time. Employees can lose their job either willingly or by laid off by the employer, and also they lose income as employees. They don't get their salaries. They might take some time to locate another job, and also they lose status in the society. If this employee was the managing director of an organization and is laid out, I want to believe for him to retain the lifestyle and the standard of a managing director without a salary, without an income, might not be very easy. And it can also affect him or her psychologically, because realizing that your status have been interfered with, you might even want to run away from people. And then maybe it might not be very easy to land to another job at the same level. And this can affect you psychologically, financially, and it will even move down to your family when you cannot provide what really you are able to provide when you are in that organization. And just in case you want to look for another job, your employer who has laid you off might not be willing to give you a good recommendation letter. And so this will also affect you as an employee.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Beatrice. The effects are detrimental, to say the least. If I can just read them out, you're talking about for the organization, there is a danger of the organization losing profits. Your profits might go down. If your employees or your conflict gets in at the crisis level, there's a big danger of you losing even your property because of vandalization and other things like that. You will lose the best employees. We all know how impossible it is to recruit good people, and then you just have good people and they decide to go. You will also lose your reputation as a brand. You don't have a good name anymore. For the employees, you lose a job. Loss of a job means you don't have an income, which affects everybody that depends on you. At the same time, it just makes your hunting for another job even more difficult. Dr. Beatrice, given how difficult and how dire the effects of workplace conflict is, then what are the benefits of mediation to the workplace, and how can we go around it?
So the benefits of mediation in the workplace, number one, would be as an employer, as an organization, you will be able to retain your good, competent employees. And these are really a goal to maintain in an organization. You realize when conflicts are handled in good time and the staff are happy, then higher levels of production are attained, quality goods and services are produced and given and provided by your employees. This will lead to higher profits, and there will be a peaceful working environment. And then people can enjoy good communications channels in the organization. And to the employee will have a sense of belonging, because they will kind of own the organization. And out there, they will sell the organization as the best place to work in. They will be there to defend the organization from any attacks that might come out from anywhere. And they will also be able to enjoy their work in the organization. Grace and the rest, I want to say that mediation in the workplace is the inner thing for any organization that wants to retain its good employees, the organization that wants to be on the top of the line and be the mentor of all other organizations in their businesses. The thing to put in place is the structures on mediation, because mediation provides an effective, efficient, speedy, convenient, and less expensive process. In other words, if mediation is brought in to solve a workplace conflict, the employer will not really take years and years with the legal battles in the courts. They will not pay the advocate's fee. They will not be able to wait for years and years. Like we know now, there is a lot of delay because of the backlog in the courts. And a solution will be gotten within a short time, and people will be able to move on. And then the way mediation will help the conflict to be solved is in such a way that everybody will retain their dignity and mutual respect, and there is a lot of appreciation retaining relationships through mediation in the workplace. But I want to say, for this to happen, the mediator needs to be a qualified mediator, one who can be engaged at any level and protect the institution, because that is the key thing behind mediation. Cheap, easy to manage, able to do it within short time, and retain relationships.
All right. So the key benefit there is you are going to get expeditious resolve to all the matters that are affecting your organization and affecting your employees. And usually the principle about conflict is the sooner you resolve it properly and in a nice way, the better it is for everybody involved. You save yourself, losses, you save yourself all the losses we talked about, loss of employees, loss of good employees. And it's very important that as a workplace manager or an employee, you embrace mediation, because that is it's going to be the cheapest way for you to be able to achieve anything. Now we have some questions that are coming through, and I will also invite our virtual studio audience to ask questions again. But before that, there's a question here coming from Phoebe. She asks, at what point should an employee quit if there is consistent conflict in an organization, since I believe mental health is also very important for productivity?
Thank you for that question. It is very important for each person, an employee or employer, to take care of their mental health. And so it is important that the mediation, as I said, is lined up in the organization. And if it is there and it is present, then it is good that when a conflict arises, then you seek the services of the mediation department. However, if after going around and solving the problem, you realize another problem is still coming, and it's like you end up not even having peace of mind, then you take care and take charge of your own mental health, and then maybe you can look for a better job or another position somewhere. But with the mediation, I believe one doesn't have to quit their job, because always a solution is available. Because in mediation, you even address other underlying issues. An example is like what Grace asked me from the beginning. When somebody is sick and keeps quiet, in mediation, that can be explored as to why somebody is keeping quiet. But If it was just looking at it and say, you are keeping quiet when you come on duty, people talk to you, you don't talk to us, you are not a good employee. That will be the difference, because when a mediator comes in, then that reason is explored and somebody retains their job.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to invite our studio audience, our virtual studio audience, if they have a question, kindly unmute yourself and ask your question.
I have a question. My question go like this. Apart from calling a mediator to solve a conflict in the workplace, which other frameworks can a company come up with to minimize conflicts?
Before the mediator comes in, there is the need for a company to set up their structure in such a way that they have a way of addressing conflicts that are arising in the company internally. And one way of doing it is having the structure in place. Number two, there needs to be good chain of communication, that there is communication from up down, and there should be also communication from down up, so that everybody feels they belong to the institution and they are involved in a decision making. Just before a new product is introduced in a company, it is important that all employees are informed about it and their view is taken into consideration. That way, conflict in implementing the new product will not be experienced.
Okay, do we have another question from our virtual studio audience? All right. Yes, please go ahead.
Good morning, Dr.
Morning.
Okay, I have a question. Is there any preconditions that exist before doing mediation?
Before becoming a mediator or before going
before conducting a mediation?
Yes, you need first of all to be engaged by the institution or by the people themselves who have come to you, and you need to understand the situation so that when you go into mediation, you know what you are handling.
All right. Thank you very much for those questions. I want to take other questions that are coming in through our Facebook page. We are, and this is a very interesting question that came in. And the question is mediation a step towards termination of your contract? As an employee, things have been going wrong, and then you're told to go for mediation because of something. Is that a step towards termination? Are you just about to be shown the door?
The mediation is involved. It means whoever is sending you for mediation sees a lot of potential in you, but you have some things that you need to work on. And these things can only be worked on through mediation. So if you go for mediation, you are helped to identify where you are not doing or behaving the way you are supposed to behave in the workplace. And if that is sorted out, then you are good to go. Actually, the person who sends you for mediation, that person has a lot of value for you.
Thank you very much. A lot of times when someone says, go for mediation, is because they don't want you to go. In fact, they do not want to lose you as an employee. So they better correct what the mistake is. And then after that, you can move on and work. Another question that is also very interesting is, in case of a situation where departments are differing with each other due to competition. So this is from one department to the other. Is there need for mediation, or is that an issue that we can mediate upon?
Yeah, this is a mediatable situation, or rather mediatable condition, conflict, because it means then when you look at the structure in the organization, it means that the allocation of responsibilities is overlapping. And that is why the departments are competing on one issue. And so what needs to be done during mediation is to identify which responsibility can go to which department and which one is taken by which department.
Okay, so we are saying departmental, conflicts arise, and I really like this question. Like one department is conflicting with the other, you sit down and allocate. So it's also a bit of an organizational issue in terms of structure, but it is also a mediatable issue, because it's true that a lot of conflict can arise from that. Another very interesting question: how do you differentiate a conflict that is worth mediation and one that requires disciplinary action? I like that question very much. How do you make the difference? How do you tell the difference between a conflict that requires mediation and a conflict that requires disciplinary action?
One, I also like that question. Is really an interesting one, creating a very good scenario. And it's good to know that mediation is kind of a solution to not being sacked. Discipline is different from losing your job. And if you realize that what you have done really needs you to be disciplined, but you seem not to see, you don't agree that what you did really needs discipline, then mediation can come in to help you see what is your contribution, where you are not doing things the way they should be. But it's good to know that mediation will not cover you not to be disciplined. Everybody should be able to take responsibility of the things that they do. Grace, I want to give an example here. If you have been stealing from your employer, you cannot say, please don't sack me, just send me for mediation. What are you going to mediate about? About how you have been stealing? You need to know that there are things that you take responsibility. But if you have been stealing and your employer takes you for mediation, what the employer would be requiring is how can you refund the money that they have been able to identify the quality or the amount that you have stolen from them. And when you go for mediation with this, one thing that you will be able to agree with your employer is, it is true, I stole 200 shillings and I am only able to pay 100 shillings. I will refund this money, but I cannot afford to pay it at one time. I want to be understood well that mediation will not get you out of your mistakes. Mediation will empower you to do the right thing.
Okay, mediation is about, empowering you to do the right thing, not to save you from the trouble that you have caused yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking about mediating workplace conflict, a very real issue, an issue that affects us every single day, whether we are working virtually or whether we are working from home. Conflict arises when you least expect it. And Dr. Beatrice has taken us through, the various sources of conflict. She has told us that the greatest source of conflict comes from lack of proper communication, misinterpretation, misunderstanding, withholding information. Those are some of the ways that you actually realize that conflict can come in the organization. We have also looked at the various indicators of conflict, withdrawal being the greatest telltale sign that something is wrong. There's a conflict that is brewing within your organization. And Dr. Beatrice has also taken us through the various levels of conflict, and there are 3 of them. Bliss, when you can control and you can sort out things before they get out of hand, just between the 2 of you, maybe 2 colleagues or manager and colleague. We have talked about the second level, which is the clash, whereby you would need a third party involved, but a third party from the internally within the organization. And finally, the biggest of them all, of one workplace conflict, the biggest level or the highest level is a crisis, whereby there are strikes, people go slow, and people down their tools. And we've talked about the various effects of workplace conflict, and that is, of course, loss of jobs, loss of profits, and general discomfort and a lot of unhappiness within an organization. As employees and as employer, it's important that we actually stay true to our work and make sure that we do not let anything go wrong. This has been Straight Talk. We shall continue to have another conversation on mediation next week, same time, same place. We are so grateful you could find time to be with us this morning. Dr. Beatrice, thank you very much for joining us. And until next time, we want to wish you God's blessings and remind you to stay safe and stay home where you can. God bless you. See you next time. Thank you very much.
Hello, Grace, unmute yourself. We can't hear you.